Nick, thank you so much for coming on today.
Real pleasure.
Real pleasure to meet you. Now, as ever, for those that may not know you, your face just says everything to me, of course. You are the son of one of my all-time favourite comedy legends, the brilliant and wonderful Mr. Dick Emery. Tell me, how many people a day, they will stop you and say, oh, I loved your dad?
Quite a few.
Yes.
Quite a few. Yes, he's still fondly remembered. I mean, 35 years, since he died, he's still remembered.
Incredible, isn't it?
Yes.
And do you know, for me, we talk about comedy generation, but I was showing it to some of the people who are younger in here, and we were all laughing.
Yeah.
So it just proves to me comedy is timeless, you know, like that he had, I thought, this ability. I think he's a timeless comic, actually. He's a bit like Benny Hill in the sense of that, you know, funny's funny. Do you know what I mean? You can watch it and think, it doesn't date, you know, obviously you look at cars in that background and things, but it doesn't date. And you come away and think, but what was that like for you growing up? As your dad's so famous, he's making the world laugh. What was he like as a dad? Was he funny off camera?
He could be extraordinarily funny off camera. I mean, I remember staying in Weybridge and coming downstairs once, and he'd bought himself, he couldn't play it, but he bought an electric organ.
Like you do.
Like you do, as you know, every home must have one.
Yes.
And it was there in the hallway of all places, and he is sitting there with his vicar's collar on and the vicar's teeth in, stark naked, trying to play this thing, making some horrendous noises and sort of just pressing random keys. And I was in fits, just in fits laughing at him, you know.
So he was a naturally funny man.
He could be, yes. I mean, he was, he could be incredibly funny. He could see humour in a situation very readily. He could be incredibly serious. I mean, there was another side to the coin. He could be incredibly serious.
But that's all comedy geniuses, isn't it?
Oh,
They have to be the other way to get the comedy.
Yes, I mean, he suffered with depression as well, which a lot of comics do. But it wasn't, say, as on the scale of someone like Milligan, who had terrible bouts of depression. Well-documented bouts.
It's a shame, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I think those that make us laugh the most probably are the most sad. It's Tears of a Clown thing, isn't it? Yeah.
I mean, he had an incredible work ethic. He would, you know, if he had a job to do, he'd go and do it. It came before everything else. Wow. Because
he was a prolific worker. That's what I found.
He was.
Because I remember seeing him in Summer Seasons, you know, as a kid. And it's hard to imagine this today, but to be able to see somebody that close who was on TV, you know, and you know what I mean? You went home and watched him at home. It was very strange as a child to see him do it all in front of you.
Well, yes, he didn't live in that box. He didn't live in the box in the corner of the room. He actually got out of it occasionally. I mean, those days, I mean, summer season was quite something. It would be 3 months of the year.
Yeah.
You know, right
hard
through.
Work, though, twice
Very
nightly.
hard work.
Yeah.
You know, twice nightly, 3 times on a Saturday sometimes. It depended. But certainly he did work incredibly hard. And then, of course, there was pantomimes. Though later on, he didn't do so many pantomimes, and he certainly didn't do as many summer seasons, because the way that show business was going then, you were moving away from having huge summer seasons in places like Blackpool or Great Yarmouth or Bournemouth or somewhere like that, where they'd take over the Winter Garden, say, for the entire summer season.
Must have been great, though, to know to you. I think as well for an act like your dad, because of course he'd come from a showbiz family. His parents had both performers, were they?
Yes, they were.
What did they do then?
Well, my grandfather started off as an actor. I came across a photograph with him of him with Dame Gladys Cooper.
Oh wow, a name from the past.
Yes, in 1905. Wow. And it was her first appearance on stage, and they were on stage together in Colchester.
Which would be a big thing then,
It would have been. And he started off being a straight actor. And then he moved into musical, met my grandmother, and they did an act together. They worked together doing this for quite some time, I think until shortly after Dad was born. I think they worked, in fact. She had Dad, and I think he went around the theatres with them.
Like born in a trunk.
Born in a trunk. And I think he used to appear occasionally.
That's probably
as
where
a
his
little
work
toddler.
ethic came from, though, you know.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
I mean, his mother was, you know, worked very hard until he got work. Then she took a back seat. But up until that time, she'd worked and worked. I mean, she'd done all sorts of things. She'd been an agony aunt back in Edwardian Britain, which must have, you know, the Deirdre of her day.
Quite spiky in that time as well, you know, because people kept things more secret then.
Well, yes, and I think there was, instead of sort of now lots of kind advice, it was more along the lines of pull yourself together, girl, you don't know what you're doing. And like that,
get on with it.
Turn
the radio on,
yes,
move on.
Turn on, yes. Yes, take your head out of the gas oven now. And that was it. Grandfather continued in the business for quite some time, but he did all sorts of things. I mean, if he didn't have work, he'd do anything. I mean, you know, I was talking to my aunt, Dad's half sister, and she was saying, you know, he worked hard at whatever. I mean, he even cleaned toilets if he couldn't find work.
Well, work's working that time.
That's right.
So no handouts then.
No, none.
Get on with it.
No, he worked damned hard.
Yeah.
And raised, you know, there was my aunt. Well, there were two aunts, two half sisters, and a half brother. My father's half sister Anne, who died a couple of years ago. She was in Billy Elliot for 10 years.
Oh, I met her. Yeah, of course.
As grandma.
Yeah, because there was a lovely piece that they wrote about her, that she'd done so much for the show.
She was incredible.
Yeah.
And if you see, I never got to see her on stage in Billy Elliot, but they did a relay around the cinemas, and I went to see that. And she was quite incredible.
Yeah.
You know, a sad loss, really.
She was. I saw her, and I met her briefly, and she was. She just do show business.
Oh, she was.
Do you know what I mean? She loved it. You know?
She was absolutely.
Yeah,
incredible.
I loved the kids. She was very nurturing around the kids. I remember that. Yeah.
She was. Yes, and she used to buy a lottery ticket for everyone in the cast.
Wow.
Every week.
Wow.
And just go around and give out a lottery ticket. Right there.
Imagine if they'd won, Nick.
Oh yeah.
You'd be steaming, wouldn't you?
Well, yeah. Well, I think she was hoping for a little return, possibly. You know. She was, you know, she. Funnily enough, she's finished her career at the theatre she started her career at, and that was the Victoria Palace.
Yeah.
She worked there.
Nice, though.
Oh yes, she worked there. Gosh, 1940s, late 40s. Started off with the Crazy Gang, Bud Flanagan and co.
So it must have been like a second home for her, really, you know, because
the
theatre's lovely theatre. It's very warm. It looks not much outside, but it's gorgeous inside.
That's right. And of course, Dad had been working in show business before. He'd started off as an acting assistant stage manager in Ilfracombe.
The glamour.
The glamour. Yes, you know, and he did occasional characters. I think he played an old gardener in this thing, and he gradually worked his way up from there. He did all sorts of jobs in the meantime. I mean, at one time he drove a retired colonel and his wife in, I think they were up Finchley Way or somewhere like that, and he was given a uniform which was quite a size or two too big, and a cap that definitely had to be padded out with newspaper to sit on his head.
It's already comedy scenes, isn't it?
And I think it just sort of like was falling down, pushing his ears out. He was in a, and I don't think that lasted long because father couldn't do serious for very long.
Yeah.
And I think he got the sack.
As in all good showbiz traditions, though. I think.
Yes.
But you talk about being an assistant stage manager. That was a great way of getting in, you know, because I think, you know, and it was a lot more of a serious job then, because that you could, although you were doing the job, you could analyse and watch and learn from other people, couldn't you? Now you don't get that chance.
No,
really.
you don't. You know, there were lots of repertory companies going around at the time. And you could learn your craft, you could 1 minute be doing assistant stage manager, and next minute, you know, someone's ill, right, we'll have you're on, you know.
Must have been frightening in some respects.
It was. I mean, Father suffered with terrible stage fright. I mean, awful stage fright. Would make him physically sick early in his career. He would, you know, and even later on, you know, you go to a theatre with him, and he would set out all his stuff, and he had a way of setting out his dressing table.
I bet you couldn't touch things, could you?
No. You couldn't do various things. You couldn't whistle in the dressing room or in the hallway, and that was bad luck. And you had to do all sorts of penances, like turn around 3 times and spit or something. I don't know. But he had everything laid out. And then get near showtime, and he's there with the DJ on and the dead bat at the neck, and he's wandering up and down the thing. Quiet and just staring at the floor, and then he would go on, and he was fine. Once he was on, away.
It's like everybody, though, isn't it?
He had also a knack of reading an audience. He knew if it was a good audience or a bad audience, and he'd say, right, there'll be an encore, or no, there won't be an encore, depending. And that was from walking on.
That's just expertise, though, isn't it? Knowing.
No, it's all right. No,
I think that, you know, it's true that it's a comedian probably is more finely tuned, I think, than any other act at knowing when it's not gone well. And when it could go better, and sometimes you know we work with many, and they've come off and been very upset because they feel they haven't delivered enough, even though it's not. There's some audiences, as we all know, that you can't win. You know, they just don't like you that day.
Well, you know, I mean, he learned his craft doing places like the Glasgow Empire, which was the comedian's graveyard. You know. People went up there and died.
How did he get on though? Because he was obviously he's funny. Did they like him or? I
think if you learned, you just went there and did it, and then you just sort of got that bunker mentality, and you just say, right, I'm doing this, whether you like it or not. I'm going out there, and I will withstand slings and arrows. And I will do the job, and that's what he did. You know, I mean, Benny Hill, God bless him, he went up there shortly before he hit the big time. Died, stone cold, the death of deaths, the Glasgow Empire. And then 2 weeks later he was on TV, and his career on TV started happening. And then he went back 3 months later, and they were virtually on their feet applauding him.
It's funny, isn't it? The power of telly.
Absolutely. And he looked at this and he realised he didn't need to do a live show again. And he took stood right back from doing any live shows. He said, no, TV's the thing for me, I'll just do television.
I met Benny, you know, very briefly, many years ago, and he was a really nice guy, but very shy.
Terribly shy.
You know, like just, you were obviously being nice to him, but he was just sort of standing there as a, you know, and I thought, oh, have I offended him? Because when you're young, you don't know how to read people, you know, and you think, well, that's a bit odd. But then I realised that, you know, maybe that he just went into characters.
Yes, he did. I mean, characters were, I mean, a lot of actors hide behind the mask of the character. I mean, Dad would, he would adopt personas of things. I remember him going to see the bank manager one day, and he's there in a business suit with the dark rimmed glasses on, with a briefcase. And I've never seen him carry a briefcase before in my life. But there he is, going, I'm going to see the bank manager, so I have to look like the bank manager to show that I mean business. And so he did that sort of thing.
But very clever, actually, because it puts the other person off.
Oh, yeah.
Because they're looking at a mirror image, aren't they?
Well, yes, there's mirroring going on. And,
but am I right, Nicky, remind you that he also went into the infamous Windmill Theatre?
He did.
Which is apparently, as we're speaking, could be closed down again and all that sort of stuff. What did he ever mention that? Because that was quite a tough gig, wasn't it?
I mean, he got that one. I found out, I mean, he said that he got it through his mother. Not quite the truth. It was through one of his father's brothers, who was lived in Brighton and was a cinema manager in Victoria. I think at Victoria Station there was a little cinema there, and he was the manager of that. And apparently he knew Victor Van Dam and mentioned that he had a nephew who was a comedian. And so an audition was arranged, and right, you're on.
Wow.
And that was it, and away he went. So yeah, he was there. I think he did 6 months there.
Wow. So it's a long stint, you know.
He followed Tony Hancock.
Oh. Yeah.
They were great mates at one time.
Well, Tony, another very dark character, wasn't he? I mean, I think very funny, you know.
Very funny.
Just a very clever man. And again, a bit like your father, knew the medium of telly, knew how to look into camera and deliver it.
Yes. He knew. There again, have a look at Tony Hancock's eye line when he's doing TV, because he couldn't remember. So if you look at the eye line, every now and then it's somewhere else. It's down to a corner because the words are on a big sheet of cardboard, and he's looking, you know, a pint that's very nearly an armful, like that. So he's looking. He couldn't remember the line,
which is terrible for a comedian because you've got to remember the punchline, haven't you?
I mean, Dad used to do some of the Hancocks on TV. There's one of him as a postman. Which is quite. If it's out there somewhere,
yeah, I think I've seen
it is worth
that,
watching because the pair of them can't look at each other because they're corpsing terribly. And they're just making themselves laugh, and it was, you know, is a way.
Well, it must be lovely for you now, though, Nick, because we live in a digital age that you can view, you know, your dad anytime you want. It's a bit like, you know, for me with my father, you can look at him and think, oh, that's what he was good at. You know what I mean? And it's kind of like, I think when I've been looking, obviously, and there's a lovely interview, I don't know if you've seen it, with Channel 1 television, which I think is in Jersey, way back in '68. And your dad is really playing around with this poor reporter who's clearly not getting the gag, you know, like he's making fun of him. And the reporter's desperately trying to be a news reporter, you know. And I thought, oh, I hope he pushes him over like Mandy. Because I think, you know, you saw then that he was being very honest. He said, this is me. You know, this is who I am. And then because the reporter wasn't really biting, he created in front of your eyes a character. You know, and it became this, you know.
He did that a lot. I said that later on in life, I think he got more caught up with being characters than being himself. I think it was easier that way, you know, to be somebody else. And the characters, it wasn't sort of like some sort of strange split personality, but it was just something he did more and more of. And I think it was easier for him to cope with things as they went on.
How did he become then this big stable of BBC? How did he get into that? Because BBC is very hard, wasn't it, to get, you know,
but you see, at that time, after the war, after the Second World War, there were a lot of people in the same position as Dad. You know, Harry Seacombe, Milligan, Benteen, all these people all came out of, you know, came out of the services. Thank God we've survived. You know, we're still here. You know, fantastic, great. They were running around London, picking up work. And bouncing ideas off each other and things like that. I mean, you had the goons over Victoria Way in the, can't think of the name of the pub now.
Oh, I know what you mean,
the Grafton Arms, Jimmy Grafton's pub, as was then. And Grafton let them have free rein and allowed them to do sketches in the pub. And then someone from the BBC got wind and said, we've got to have these people. And they went on as the, it wasn't called the Goon Show, Those Crazy People.
Yeah, that's right,
And then it became the Goon Show, and then after 2 series, Benteen left. Now, Dad was doing similar things. He was going on things like Workers' Playtime.
Which was a massive show.
Which was huge. I mean, it started off it was to keep the workers entertained during the war. And it carried on, I think, up until the 60s.
Yeah, I believe so,
and it was a half-hour show, and they went to the canteen of, I think it was somewhere, we're coming live from Foden Trucks, and we have with us today, and they'd send a huge orchestra and a couple of turns.
What do you think, though, Nick? You know, can you imagine that nowadays being in Asda or something, and somebody turns up,
everybody knows, I've only come in here for a lemon, you know.
Popped in for a cup of tea, you know.
You know, that's it, and suddenly you walk in, there's the Philharmonic sitting there. And,
I mean, lovely though, what a thing to do for the workers.
It was. And so he started getting work on those. He was working, he did various other things. He became a driving instructor, taught my mother to drive, which was an experience. And he also did a double act at one point with Charlie Drake.
Oh wow!
So that was in the early 50s, when he was teaching Mother to drive, and Mum, poor bless her heart, was being taught to drive with Charlie Drake and my grandmother smoking for Britain in the back of the car. And,
if they could have filmed these things,
my
it's
grandmother
funny,
saying things like, "What's she doing now?" like this, and Charlie Drake going, "Oh, Margot, we just missed a bus," and things like that. And so, and I mean, Mum actually spat her dummy out at Hyde Park Corner and just abandoned the car. She just got out and said, "I'm not putting up with this." Got out the car and left him and walked off down the road. "Come back, get in this car." No, so that was that. But somehow she passed a test. There you go. But no, he did he got more and more radio work. He ended up at one time being on Educating Archie. Now there's an idea for a radio show, ventriloquism on the radio.
I mean, you laughed at, but people loved it, didn't they?
They
it was
did.
Massive. And the guy, I mean, the thing, I remember an artist telling me, I think it was Mike Winters, Mike and Bernie Winters.
Yeah.
And he said to me that one day, they were doing a summer season and he was on with them,
Yeah.
And what happened was he said, he went out the door, and I don't know, he said, I don't know how he did this, but somehow the doll spoke to him after the bloke had gone out the door. And that really unnerved him.
Yes.
Because it sort of like moved. He said, you don't know how he did it.
No.
It moved the doll. And he thought, wow,
but he was the worst. He was the worst vent in the business. I mean, he was Peter Bruff, bless him, he was terrible.
Yeah.
And when on radio, what he'd do is he'd get the script up in front of the mic. So no one, the audience, the live audience watching, couldn't see the lips move, you see. So he was doing all the thing with, what's the matter, bruv, with the doll. And like that. So anyway, there was a lovely story, and I saw this on, oh gosh, Beryl Reid, who was in it.
Yeah.
And they're in the green room, and they're talking, and he's looking, Peter Bruff's looking a little concerned about things, and he said, Beryl, I've got to ask you something. So she said, what? Thinking, oh God, it's this very... So he said, can you see my lips move? And she said, only when Archie is speaking.
So cruel.
Yes.
Funny. But as you say, nobody would have bothered then.
No.
Because, I mean, I find it very strange now. I was watching your dad on Christmas Night with the Stars. Very funny, he was doing something by cinema, and I think he was an early incarnation of Mandy. It was not that character, I don't think, but similar. Somebody stopped him and everything. But when you look at Christmas Night with the Stars, you've got Jack Warner, who's a lovely man, but must be 100.
Oh, yeah.
And he's sitting there introducing Top of the Pops with Herman's Hermits or whatever. And you come away thinking that wouldn't work now. They just wouldn't allow that mixture of acts.
It's very weird.
But so your father became like this massive star at the BBC. But I read somewhere, Nick, that he thought he had this exclusive contract, but he didn't.
For years and years and years and years. I mean, his own show started in 1963.
Wow.
He'd done various bits in various things. He'd done a few Play for Today's comic plays. He'd, as I say, he'd done the thing with Hancock. He'd also been in one of the latter series of the Army game for Granada.
Another thing, massive, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. And then he appeared on Bentine's It's Square World.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And that was a lot of various characters doing various actors doing various characters.
Yeah.
And he did all sorts of characters. And Bentine, who'd known Dad for years and years and years, pushed for ages to get Dad his own series. He kept telling them he needs his own series. He needs a vehicle for himself. So 1963, and BBC say, fine, and off he goes. And from then on, from 63 till 80 to 83, as the last series went out on air posthumously, he had a series on the BBC for years and years. Though there was a little hiatus between 1979, 80-ish.
Yeah, and he went to Thames.
When he went to Thames, and he did three. Thames had been angling for him for ages and ages, saying, we want you, and he did 3 one-hour specials for them. And then BBC thought maybe we should have him back. Yeah. And so they did. But he thought he'd been under sole contract.
Ooh.
and he wasn't. And he'd gone along with his idea there for years and years, and the ITV had been saying, come and do one for us, come and do a series for us. And he'd always gone, no, I'm under sole contract. And then someone said, actually, you're not.
Quite strange, but that's an act, isn't it? When you're an act, you would just do what you think because he's an act. You know, I don't mean that rudely, but the business side of things we don't know about. You turn up, perform, go home.
Yeah, and I think there was a lot of things of don't rock the boat as well. You know, and that was definitely one of those who said don't rock the boat. You know, if it's working, you leave it alone. You don't tinker with it.
But he's phenomenal. He's like a massive star, as you say. He's up there with Morecambe and Wise and all the big names.
I mean, his viewing figures were the same as Morecambe and Wise. I mean, the exception was the Morecambe and Wise show that hit 28 million. Yeah. Which was quite a feat.
Incredible.
You wouldn't get that today. Mind you, you've got such a diverse viewing platform. You've got so many channels now that it's, I mean, I think you've got a real success if it's 8.
Mega,
You know, I mean.
But what I found lovely about your father was that, you know, he really, although it was funny to all ages, he was very clever because he appealed to kids.
Yes.
And, you know, we could repeat those catchphrases in the playground, you know, where everybody went in on a Monday saying, did you see, you know, and we didn't necessarily know the double innuendo. You know, we thought it was just funny, you know, excuse me, Madam Miss, you know, all that sort of stuff.
Yes.
And Mandy and the melons on the vicar's table. It just went over your head.
Well,
you just thought it was funny that this man's dressed up as a... But as you rightly said, and he's very clever, I thought, your father, but he wandered off and he did this little comedy trip, which, you know, he purposely looked bow-legged and, you know, wandering with a bag and everything like that. And it's all very comedy genius to come up with that back view to let the audience know that he was a fella, really.
Yes.
You know, like
that was the whole purpose of doing the trip, because it was like, I can't really walk in heels. I can't really do this. It's really a bloke in a you know, just don't remember that it's this, you know.
And he was on TV recently, I don't know if you know this, but it was on a London channel down here, his big movie, Oh You Are Awful.
Yeah.
I mean, the characters, he did, the main character, I think really proved what an actor he was, because just again, you're engrossed thinking, oh, he's this clever guy that's ripping the bank, you know, that sort of thing. You think, oh, that's clever, you know. And everybody popped in. Did he like doing the film?
He did, actually. He had a lot of fun making the film. And Ronnie Fraser.
Some big names in it, you know.
At the time, yes. Darren Nesbitt. Pat Coombs, a lovely Pat Coombs.
She was funny, wasn't she?
Oh, she was lovely.
Was she like that in real life, Nick?
She wasn't. No, she was actually quite well spoken.
Oh, so what a good actress.
Oh yes. But she did the, you know, this strange little accent. But she was lovely, Pat. Oh, Patty Coombs, she was absolutely wonderful.
And your father as well, I didn't realise this. It was so diverse. The Dick Emery Cookbook.
Yes.
Now, you know, I've got to remember, I think I saw an ad for this, you know, like, again, you're thinking, because I suppose now we're used to people being, as they call them in today's world, brands, you know.
Yes.
So he's got this phenomenal viewing figures in the BBC every Saturday night. And somebody's thought, you know what, we'll do a book with this guy who's mega popular and we'll sell books, you know. Now, I'd love to see a copy. Have you got a copy?
I've got a copy somewhere. I've got one somewhere.
Because it would be good if you did recipes as the characters, wouldn't it?
He did. Well, that's what it was. It was various characters. Yeah, you know, and I mean, the characters sort of had a life of their own. I mean, I mean, he developed them over time. So that, you know, the cookbook was an idea that came along, and yes, we'll do that. I mean, he'd did another book, Dick Emery in characters, I think, where he sort of had little clips from scripts and sort of his view on the characters as well.
Oh, that's nice.
So that was one thing he did.
I wish they'd republish things like that, because I think now, you know, so many people, there's so many people that love your father, and I think we'd love to know more, you know, because particularly those that grew up with him, we'd love to know how he came up with them, you know, the development of these.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you some. I mean, Mandy, which people remember, the blonde, oh, you are awful, don't like you, thump. Now, you see, I mean, that came out of the time of the Profumo affair.
Oh, yes.
Christine Keeler's friend.
Yeah.
Mandy Rice Davis. Only Dad called her Mandy Rice Crispy.
Yeah.
And So that's where that started
that's
from.
lovely to know that, because you wonder that, you
know.
That's
like, where that started from, with the Vox Pops at the beginning, the little street interviews. It was sort of a character based on that.
Yeah.
He'd been doing, I mean, when he'd been in the RAF gang shows.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And he'd been doing characters in that, because they all had to do characters. Yeah. They all had to be the chorus girls. They all had to be this, that, and the
other. It's
a
bit like it ain't half hot, Mum, isn't it?
It
Gloria,
was. It was. I mean, you know, they had a hell of a life in it.
Yeah.
He toured. They did I think they did every RAF station in Britain at that time. So in the back of a truck, they always lived in the back of a lorry.
Yeah, yeah, and performed on the back of the lorries, didn't they?
And he one day foolishly decided to use the back of the truck as his dressing room, and someone got in the cab and drove it to the lorry, the MT park, 2 miles away. So he missed the show. They went
that's just comedy in itself, isn't it?
Oh, they went.
Can you imagine him?
What? Say.
And the guy's driving.
So they flew to post D-Day to Europe from Croydon Airport. He said it was not the most. How can we say this? It was the most sort of. There was a lot of trepidation. He said because a gentleman arrived because they were having trouble starting one of the plane's engines. Oh. Bearing in mind it was a 2-engine plane.
Yeah, bit worrying. Nick.
And then this, you don't get that on EasyJet. And this chap came out with a stepladder, climbed onto the wing, opened up a little flap, rolled up his sleeve, and delved into the guts of the engine. And then did thumbs up to the pilot, and this thing coughed and belched lots of smoke, and then chugged into life, and then he slid off onto the ladder and walked away doing thumbs up at everybody, and they just flew off.
That must have been nerve-wracking.
Oh, yes.
Thinking, well, what did he do?
Well, exactly. He nearly died in France. They went to a forward air base, and they'd been living on the back of this in lorries, and you know, they were in poor health. They all had dysentery at one point.
Well, they're not looked after, are they?
Oh,
I mean,
no,
you know what I mean? It's a rough time for these
boys.
Just
entertain the troops. There you go, chaps.
Yeah,
that's
carry on.
Fine. Yes, we'll carry on. Yes, we also, you know, are doing a marvellous job, keeping the boys entertained anyway. So he and a friend found 2 old tin baths and dragged them across the airfield and found some jerry cans full of water. Thought, we'll have a bath, you know,
like
luxury. You know, so they lined these things up and they've filled them cold water, and they've got a bar of carbolic, and they're scrubbing themselves.
Miss carbolic, don't you?
Absolutely.
Lovely smell.
Yes, absolutely. So washing themselves, and there's this almighty great whoosh, and an explosion in the next field. And looking down between the 2 baths is a burn mark through the grass. Wow. And a plane called a Typhoon, which was being loaded with rockets. One dropped off and went off across the ground and went between the 2 baths. Wow.
That's incredible, isn't it? You can see where he got his comedy mind from after that, can't you? Because now you think that couldn't be true, but it's happened and he's got it. So
he survived all that. He toured all around Europe performing, and then came back to Britain.
Wow.
So he'd started doing the characters. A lot of characters started off. Their beginnings were in the RAF gang show.
I thought, you know, I have to say, because we haven't got much long left, but I have to say, finally, I thought he was so versatile, because I didn't realise he'd had a hit record as well. I mean, you know, he had a nice voice.
Well,
you know, I don't mean that rude, but beautifully.
He was opera trained.
Oh wow! You see, because it's a, you know. Now, I mean, I think the song, I'm surprised nobody's covered it, because it's such a memorable hit, you know. And you think, well, why has Michael Ball grabbed that? You know what I mean? But you kind of think, well, it's a good song.
It's a very simple song.
Yeah.
He did it, that was in the 70s. I think it reached number 32.
Which was, but then would be respectable.
Oh yeah.
Because now, you know, you have to be number 1 or somebody who knows you are. No. But records climbed. Do you remember in those days? You could go and buy them week after week.
Yes, and you could watch their programs.
Yeah, and you kind of felt you were part of a club buying them, didn't you? You know, I think that's, to me, where it was quite clever. I have to ask as well, did your dad ever do any ads for anything on TV?
He did. In the early 60s, he did... Sorry Mate, You're Too Late, the best piece went to Farrah's.
Oh, right.
Which was dried peas.
Yes.
You know? SO Blue, and he did that. I think he did Supernational Petrol.
Wow. So they were, because they were quite lucrative. I think I saw an ad online with him promoting it, maybe Ford or something, where he did various characters.
Yes, he did.
And again, you know, I mean, it's like a proper show in one, really.
He did in New Zealand and Australia. He did ads over there for Kelvinator fridges and things like that, where he appeared as Vickers, this, that, and the other, and everything like that.
When he met Vickers, Nick, did people recoil? Because I mean, really, when you think about it, the Vicar was, to me, Lampwick and the Vicar were two of my favourites. But I just thought the Vicar was like, we had a Vicar like that, you know, down at school, and he had the teeth and everything. And I've often wondered if you met the Vicar or met Dick when he was in character, he must have thought, that's not me.
Well, I'm sure, you know, but they do have a walk. They do have a way of talking. Yeah. They have this sort of this walk, and Val used to do it, and as he was doing the walk, he'd say, "Coming, Lord," like this, you know. But they were an amalgam of Vickers that he'd met down the years. You know, I mean, Lampwick was Lampwick was a carpenter.
Oh, right.
He was a stage carpenter in a theatre.
Oh.
And Dad added the to it.
Which we loved, you know, because I thought that again is genius, because that's what you remember.
His name was Bert Dent. Yeah. He was a carpenter who used to shuffle about in the background.
Yeah.
You know, so that's where.
I mean, there's a beautiful piece. I don't know what the film is, but it's where he's in Blackpool, and I don't think it's Lampwick, but he's playing an old man, and there's this comedy piece in there. It's genius, where he's looking at this woman who's having suntan lotion put on her back by this guy, and he's leaning over with the ice cream. The ice cream smacks on the and it's just all brilliantly done. And then he turns away and walks off. She slaps him, and it's all very clever. You know what I mean? Very clever. And you think, now how did he think of that? And to do it all in one shot, you can see how they've done it, you know. And you think that's very clever, you know. I have to ask finally, Nick, how would you like your father to be remembered? We all love him, and I know kids of my generation and you know, younger still like him. It seems to me that he's not respected enough in the comedy world. What's your take on that? You know, why would you think he's not?
Why he's not? I think because people at BBC at that time were very keen on pigeonholing people.
Yeah.
And if you were doing comedy, you did comedy, and that was it. You know, you stayed doing that. You never moved off into anything else. You know, had he been given the opportunity, I think he could have done a lot of character parts.
Nick Emery, it's been really lovely to talk to you today. Thank you so much, sir.
Not at all.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.